The severed head of a consul. Imagine this. A Roman consul, the highest elected leader of the Republic, charging bravely into battle, only to fall beneath the blades of his enemies. His head is severed, raised high on a spear, and paraded before tens of thousands of warriors. For the Celts, it was a sign from the gods. For Rome, it was a humiliation too great to bear. This is the forgotten story of Telamon 225 BC, where Rome avenged its fallen consul in one of the bloodiest and most decisive battles of the ancient world. A clash where cunning, discipline, and iron resolve crushed sheer ferocity. Cinematic horns rise, visuals, a head dripping with blood raised above cheering Celtic warriors, gives Roman legions tightening their formations, gives cavalry thundering across the hills. The gathering storm, the year was 225 BC, and the Republic was still young, still untested by the storms that would one day define it. But danger came not from Carthage, nor from Greece, came from the north. The Celtic tribes, fierce and unpredictable, had poured across the Alps. For generations, they had raided the Italian countryside, burning villages and terrorizing farmers. To the Romans, they were barbarians, giants with wild hair, painted bodies, and an insatiable hunger for plunder. To the Celts themselves, they were warriors, destined to carve out a new homeland. This time, their invasion was no mere raid. Two great tribes, the Insubres and the Boii, had forged an alliance, joined by mercenaries from Gaul. Nearly 50,000 warriors marched south, determined to break Roman power once and for all. Rome answered with fury. Two consular armies, nearly 100,000 men in total, moved to intercept. One was commanded by Lucius Aemilius Papus, a steady and cautious leader. The other by Gaius Atilius Regulus, bold, daring, and hungry for glory. The two armies closed in on the Celts from opposite directions, like jaws ready to snap shut. The invaders suddenly realized the trap. They were caught between Rome's legions, with no escape. But rather than surrender, the Celts did the unthinkable. They formed a double line. Half their army turned to face Papus, the other half to face Regulus. Back to back, shield to shield, they prepared to fight on two fronts. It was a scene rarely witnessed in ancient warfare. Two armies colliding from north and south, with the Celts crushed in the middle. The fall of Regulus. Regulus saw his chance. If he could seize the high ground before the Celts, he could crush their flank and earn eternal glory. With his cavalry, he charged forward. But the Celts were ready. From hidden positions, their warriors burst forth, surrounding the consul and his men. Blades flashed, shields splintered, horses screamed. In the chaos, Regulus was cut down. The Celts hacked off his head, mounted it on a spear, and raised it high for all to see. A Roman consul, the pride of the Republic, reduced to a trophy. Papus stand, and the Roman formation, the death of Consul Regulus, sent shockwaves through the Roman ranks. A consul's head on a spirit was a humiliation Rome had not tasted in generations. Panic rippled through the soldiers who had witnessed it. Some faltered, others whispered that the gods had abandoned them. But there was another consul on the field. Lucius Aemilius Papus, seasoned and steady, did not allow fear to rule. Where Regulus had sought glory in a reckless charge, Papus chose discipline. He climbed the nearest hill, surveyed the battlefield, and issued calm, deliberate orders. This was the moment Rome's greatest strength would be tested, its discipline of formation. The triplex, acies, Papus, arranged his legions into the triplex, acies, the threefold battle line that had become the backbone of Roman warfare. At the front stood the velites, light infantry, armed with javelins. They were the young and untested, quick on their feet, tasked with disrupting the enemy before the main clash. Behind them, the hastily, fresh but determined swordsmen carried long shields and short blades. Next came the principes, seasoned veterans, men hardened by years of battle, their shields locked, their courage unshakable. And at the rear, the triarii, the oldest and most experienced. They were the final reserve, the unbreakable wall Rome kept for moments of desperation. This was no mob, no horde. This was a machine, forged by discipline and drilled by centuries of tradition. The Celtic fury across the plain, the Celts roared like thunder. Their war cries echoed through the valley. Painted bodies gleamed with sweat. Great swords raised high, they charged with reckless abandon. To them, numbers and ferocity were enough. The ground shook as thousands rushed forward. The Romans waited, shields braced, spears ready. At Papus' command, the velites unleashed their storm. Javelins darkened the sky, slamming into the Celtic front. Dozens fell, hundreds stumbled. The momentum of the charge slowed. Then, as planned, the velites slipped back through the gaps in the line. The hastily stepped forward, shields interlocking, swords at the ready. The clash was brutal. Celtic swords hacked down, denting shields, splintering wood. Roman blades darted forward, stabbing in quick, practiced thrusts. For a moment, it seemed the Celts might break through. The sheer weight of their charge pressed the hastily back. But this was Rome's way. When the front grew weary, the line did not collapse, rotated. Veterans filled the gap, steady as stone, pushing the Celts back inch by inch. Papus' patience. From his vantage point, Papus watched calmly. He knew the Celts burned hot, but burned fast. Their fury was a fire, but fire consumes itself. Rome's discipline was water unyielding, steady, ready to suffocate the blaze. And so the lines held. Blood poured into the soil, but the Romans did not break. For the Celts, it was a sign of victory, a gift from the gods. Their roars shook the battlefield. For the Romans, it was a wound deeper than any sword. The Republic had been insulted, and Rome would answer with vengeance. The hammer and the anvil, the clash raged for hours. The Celts fought like men, possessed massive swords, cleaving shields. Their bodies painted with woad, their war cries echoing through the valley of Telamon. For every Roman who fell, 3 Celts seemed to surge forward, stamping and shouting as if their fury alone could shatter Rome's iron line. Yet the legions held. The principes, veterans of many campaigns, locked their shields tighter, absorbing the storm blow after blow. Roman discipline was proving stronger than Celtic rage. But Papus knew that discipline alone could not win this battle. The Celts had too many warriors, too much momentum. If Rome was to survive, the battle had to be broken, not just fought. And so he prepared his trap. The setup, the Celts were fighting on 2 fronts, back to back. One line faced Papus' legions. The other faced the remnants of Regulus men. They were stretched thin, unable to maneuver, their warriors locked in a desperate grind. Papus had been patient, waiting for this moment. His cavalry, which had held position on the high ground, was fresh, rested, and ready. Now he gave the order. The horns of Rome sounded. The cavalry charged from the ridges above. Roman cavalry thundered down like an avalanche. Horses screamed. Hooves pounded. Dust exploded into the air. The Celts barely had time to turn before the charge smashed into their exposed flank. Spears pierced through shields. Swords cut down painted warriors, and the Celtic formations, so fierce and proud, buckled under the weight of iron and horseflesh. Panic spread as men shouted, turning to face the new threat. But in doing so, they exposed their backs to the principes pressing forward. They were trapped. The hammer and the anvil on one side, the Roman infantry ground forward, steady and relentless, the anvil. On the other, the cavalry smashed again and again into the Celtic, flanked the hammer. Every clash crushed more warriors between them. The valley became a slaughterhouse. Warriors fell screaming, trampled under horses, or stabbed beneath shields. The Celts fought with desperate bravery, but bravery was no match for the machine of Rome. The breaking point, the Celtic chieftain Unveiled tried to rally his men. He raised his sword, calling on the gods, urging them to stand fast. But even he was cut down in the chaos, vanishing beneath the storm of blades. Another leader, Consul Gaius, was captured alive, dragged away in chains to be paraded through the streets of Rome. His fate was worse than death. Humiliation, slavery, and execution in the triumph of his conquerors. The rest of the Celtic army collapsed. Some threw down their weapons and fled, only to be hunted down across the hills. Others fought to the last breath, their bodies piling in heaps at the feet of the legions. By nightfall, the valley of Telamon was littered with tens of thousands of corpses. The Roman losses had been heavy, but the Celtic host had been annihilated. The legacy of Telamon. When the dust settled over Telamon, the valley was silent except for the cries of the wounded and the carrion birds circling overhead. Tens of thousands of Celts lay scattered across the battlefield. Their proud invasion, which had begun with fire and confidence, had ended in blood and ruin. Rome had paid dearly. Thousands of legionaries lay dead among the heaps of bodies, but the victory was total. For the first time, the Republic had confronted a full-scale Celtic invasion on Italian soil and emerged unbroken. The end of Celtic power in Italy, the defeat at Telamon, shattered the might of the Insubres and the Boii. The two great tribes who had dared to challenge Rome. Their leaders were either slain or dragged in chains to Rome. Consul Gaius, the Celtic king, would one day walk through the streets of the capital not as a victor, but as a prisoner displayed in a Roman triumph before meeting his end at the executioner's hand. The Celts who survived were scattered, their lands ravaged, their morale broken. From that moment forward, Celtic power in Italy would never again threaten the Republic as it once had. Rome had proven not only its strength, but its capacity for vengeance. The death of Consul Regulus had been answered with the destruction of an entire nation. Seeds of future war, and yet history is never so simple. Among the survivors of Telamon were warriors who would carry their hatred south, offering their swords to a new master, Hannibal of Carthage. 2 decades later, when Hannibal crossed the Alps and shattered Rome at Trebia, Trasimene, and Cannae, many of his fiercest troops were Celts whose fathers had died at Telamon. Rome's victory, though glorious, planted the seeds of a far greater storm. Rome's lesson for the Republic, Telamon, was more than just another battle. It was a turning point. It taught the Senate that sheer numbers were not enough to guarantee victory, but discipline, patience, and leadership could triumph even against the fiercest enemies. It also showed the Roman people that their legions, though bloodied, could endure anything and still emerge victorious. From this moment on, Rome's confidence grew. They were no longer a city-state defending Italy. They were a rising power destined to dominate it. The eternal echo, and so, the story of Telamon is not only the tale of vengeance for a consul's severed head. It is the tale of how Rome proved to itself and to the world that it could not be cowed by terror, rage, or barbarian fury. The Celts had raised Regulus' head on a spear as a triumph. By the battle's end, that trophy lay forgotten in the dirt, while the eagle standards of Rome gleamed in the sun. The Battle of Telamon was not just another Roman victory, was vengeance carved into the earth. A consul had fallen, his head raised as a trophy of shame. But Rome answered with iron, discipline, and blood. By nightfall, tens of thousands of Celtic warriors lay broken, their dreams of conquest buried beneath Roman steel. Telamon became a turning point. The Celts would never again threaten Italy as they once had. Rome had shown the world that even in the face of humiliation, it would rise stronger, fiercer, unstoppable. And yet, history whispers another truth. The sons and grandsons of the fallen Celts would march again not under their own banners, but beneath the command of Hannibal of Carthage. Telamon ended one storm, but sowed the seeds of another, a storm that would one day bring Rome to the brink of annihilation. If this story of vengeance and survival moved you, don't let it vanish into silence. Hit like to honor the fallen of history. Share this tale with those who crave the forgotten truths of Rome. And subscribe to Empire Unveiled Legends for more epic battles, betrayals, and legends that shaped civilization. Because here, history is not just remembered, it is unveiled.